A blood-red Ferrari pulls into an abandoned Compton junkyard, and out steps Park Jin-Woo, 47-year-old Korean Mafia boss dripping in gold rings and designer suits. His eyes fall on Marcus, a skinny 14-year-old black boy covered in grease, wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big. And Jin-Woo laughs. Not just laughs, he mocks, he ridicules, he makes this child feel like nothing. This is the genius. He sneers to his armed bodyguards. A dirty child playing mechanic. But Jin-Woo's Ferrari has a problem no Beverly Hills mechanic could solve, so he makes Marcus a cruel offer. 60 seconds to diagnose the car without opening the hood. Get it right, and the $250,000 Ferrari is his. Get it wrong, and Marcus becomes his slave for a year. The stopwatch starts. And what this poor black boy does in those 60 seconds, the way he listens to the ground, reads vibrations through his fingertips, hears what the machine is whispering, it doesn't just shock the mafia boss, it shatters him, because Marcus sees something in that engine that's invisible to everyone else. And Jin-Woo realizes he's just become the man he swore he'd never be, his own cruel father. What happens next will make you question everything you think you know about power, respect, and what it means to truly see another human being. Before we start the story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, recognition, and hidden truths move you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the abandoned junkyard in Compton, casting long shadows across rusted car frames and forgotten dreams. Marcus Johnson sat on an overturned oil drum, his small hands black with grease. His oversized hoodie hanging off his thin 14-year-old frame like a shroud. He was invisible here, just as he was invisible everywhere else. The world had a way of looking through boys like him. Boys with nothing, boys who lived in shelters and wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. But Marcus didn't mind being invisible. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant people left you alone to do what you loved. And what Marcus loved, what Marcus lived for, was the language of engines. While other kids heard music in their headphones, Marcus heard symphonies in cylinder-firing sequences. While others saw rusty metal, he saw potential, saw life waiting to be resurrected. He was tightening a bolt on a 1987 Chevy transmission when he heard it. The sound stopped him cold. That engine, that wasn't just any engine. That was a Ferrari V8, and it was singing wrong. The note was off, corrupted, like a violin with a cracked string. Marcus stood slowly, listening, his entire body becoming an antenna for mechanical distress. The Ferrari F8 Tributo appeared around the corner like a blood-red shark entering a graveyard. Behind it came two black SUVs, their windows tinted so dark they looked like rolling voids. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't good. Rich people didn't come to this part of Compton. And when they did come with armed escorts, it meant trouble. The Ferrari's door opened with a hydraulic whisper, and out stepped Park Jin-Woo. 47 years old, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than most cars in this junkyard, rings glittering on every finger like golden knuckles. His face was sharp, predatory, the face of a man who had built an empire on fear and respect. 4 bodyguards emerged from the SUV's hands, resting near concealed weapons, eyes scanning the perimeter with professional paranoia. Jin-Woo looked at the junkyard with barely concealed disgust, his lip curling as if the poverty itself might be contagious. "Where is he?" he barked in accented English. "Where is this ghost mechanic everyone whispers about?" Marcus stepped forward, his movements small, non-threatening. The laughter that erupted from Jin-Woo was sharp and cruel. A sound that carried decades of his own buried shame, transformed into weaponized mockery. This is the genius. He turned to his men, gesturing at Marcus with theatrical disbelief. "Look at this, they sent me a child. A dirty child." His bodyguards laughed on cue, their laughter mechanical, obligatory. Jin-Woo circled Marcus like a predator, examining wounded prey. "How old are you, boy? 12? 10? Did your mother send you out here to play mechanic while she's 14? Marcus interrupted quietly, his voice steady as stone. And my mother's in prison. The honesty of it landed like a slap. Jin-Woo paused, something flickering behind his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or memory. But the moment passed and the cruelty returned, harder now, compensating, even better. A orphan playing with tools. Tell me, boy, can you even spell Ferrari? Marcus said nothing. He simply looked at the car, his dark eyes tracing the lines, listening to the engine's idle with an intensity that bordered on supernatural. Jin-Woo noticed the look, and it irritated him. This child was ignoring him. Nobody ignored Park Jin-Woo. My Ferrari makes a noise, Jin-Woo said, his voice dropping into something dangerous. A noise that 3 mechanics in Beverly Hills couldn't identify. They replaced parts, charged me thousands, and still the sound remains. Someone told me there's a ghost in Compton who can hear what machines are thinking. So here I am, in this, he gestured around with contempt. This dump. Looking at you, Marcus continued, staring at the Ferrari, his head tilted slightly, as if the car itself was whispering secrets only he could understand. Jin-Woo's patience snapped. You want to prove you're not worthless? Fine, I'll give you a chance. 60 seconds. 1 minute you tell me what's wrong with my car without opening the hood, without touching the engine. And if you're actually right, the car is yours. The bodyguards exchanged glances. Their boss was being generous in his cruelty today. But when you fail, Jin-Woo continued, stepping closer, his breath hot with expensive cologne and cheaper malice. You work for me. Free labor. 1 year in my shop. My personal slave. Cleaning toilets, scrubbing floors, whatever I want. Do we have a deal? Marcus looked up at Jin-Woo for the first time, really looked at him, and Jin-Woo felt something uncomfortable in that gaze. No fear. No desperation, just calculation. Deal, Marcus said simply. Jin-Woo smiled like a shark. He pulled out his phone, opened the stopwatch app, and held it up for everyone to see. 60 seconds, ghost boy. Your pathetic future starts now. He pressed start. The world seemed to narrow into a single point of focus. Marcus didn't run to the Ferrari. He didn't panic. He simply moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had lived his entire life, translating a language no one else could hear. His sneakers, worn thin at the soles, made soft sounds against the gravel as he approached the gleaming machine. 10 seconds elapsed. Marcus walked around the rear of the Ferrari, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and deliberate. He wasn't looking at the car, he was listening to it, feeling it, absorbing the vibrations that rippled through the air like invisible currents. The engine idled with its corrupted song, and Marcus let that song wash over him, dissecting each note, each frequency, each discordant element. He's not even touching it. One of the bodyguards whispered in Korean to another. What is he doing? Jin-Woo said nothing. He kept his eyes locked on the stopwatch, but something in his peripheral vision, this skinny boy moving with such deliberate purpose, made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. 20 seconds. Marcus dropped to his knees, near the rear wheels, pressing his ear close to the asphalt. The bodyguards laughed again, louder this time, more confident. He's praying, one shouted. The little boy is praying to his God. But Jin-Woo didn't laugh. He watched as Marcus placed his palm flat against the ground, his fingers spreading wide, his entire body going still. The boy was reading vibrations through the earth itself, using the ground as a conductor for mechanical frequency. Jin-Woo had never seen anything like it. In 47 years of life, in 2 decades of running illegal operations and legitimate businesses, he had never witnessed someone diagnose a machine by listening to the earth beneath it. 30 seconds. Marcus rose to his feet in one fluid motion and moved to the driver's side. His hand hovered over the front fender, not touching, just feeling the heat signature radiating from the metal. Then, with his knuckles, he tapped the fender once, twice, 3 times in different spots. Each tap produced a slightly different sound, a different resonance. He was reading the car like blind man reads Braille, translating metal into meaning. 40 seconds. "This is ridiculous," Jin-Woo heard himself say, but his voice lacked conviction. The boy's concentration was absolute, almost frightening in its intensity. Marcus moved to another section of the fender, tapped again, tilted his head, and then for just a fraction of a second, his eyes opened wide with recognition. He had found something. 50 seconds. Jin-Woo felt sweat forming on his palms. Impossible. This was impossible. The boy hadn't opened anything, hadn't used a single tool, hadn't even looked under the car. He was just listening, feeling, knowing. Marcus straightened up, his face calm as still water. 55 seconds had passed. Oxygen sensor, bank 2, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension like a surgical blade. His words came fast now, precise, each one landing with the weight of absolute certainty. "It's reading rich when it should read lean. But the sensor isn't your real problem. Mere mechanics already replaced it 3 times, didn't they? The actual problem is the secondary air control valve. It's stuck at 40% open. That's why the sound only happens above 4,000 RPM in 3rd gear. Your mechanics kept chasing the symptom instead of the cause." Jin-Woo's mouth went dry. "There's more," Marcus continued, his eyes meeting Jin-Woo's directly now, unflinching. "There's a microfracture in the weld joint where your catalytic converter mount connects to the exhaust manifold. It's hairline right now, invisible to normal inspection. But in about 800 kilometers, maybe less, that fracture becomes a full break. Your exhaust system will tear itself apart at highway speed. Could cause a fire, could kill you 58 seconds. The stopwatch hit 60, and the alarm sounded a tiny digital beep that seemed to echo across the entire junkyard. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The 4 bodyguards stood frozen, their earlier mockery evaporated into stunned silence. Jin-Woo stared at Marcus, his face cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. "That's impossible," Jin-Woo whispered. "Nobody can diagnose that without equipment. Without opening, without seeing one of his bodyguards." A man named Kim, who had worked as a mechanic before joining the organization, pulled out his phone with shaking hands. He dialed a number, spoke rapid Korean, waited. When the response came, his face went pale. He turned to Jin-Woo and said in their native language, "Boss, I just called Lee at the Santa Monica shop, the master mechanic," he says. "He says the only way to find a stuck secondary air valve is with specialized diagnostic equipment and a partial exhaust system disassembly. He says it would take hours. He says there's no way anyone could know about a microfracture in a catalytic converter mount without ultrasonic testing." He says, Kim's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. He says, "This boy just did something impossible." Jin-Woo looked back at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. Not at the dirty hoodie or the too thin frame or the brown skin that he had dismissed with such casual cruelty. He looked at the eyes, those dark, knowing eyes that held more wisdom than most men accumulated in a lifetime. And in those eyes, Jin-Woo saw himself at 15, standing in his father's office, being called worthless, being told he would never amount to anything, being invisible in his own home. He saw every moment of pain he had transformed into cruelty, every wound he had inflicted on others because someone had once inflicted it on him. The Ferrari keys felt heavy in Jin-Woo's pocket, heavier than they had ever felt before. He reached in slowly, pulled them out, and held them in his palm. The metal caught the sunlight, throwing fractured rainbows across the gravel. Marcus didn't move, didn't reach for them, just waited with that same impossible calm. "How?" Jin-Woo asked, and his voice had lost all its edge, all its performance. It was just a question, human and small. "How did you do that?" Marcus shrugged, a tiny gesture. "I listen. Most people don't." The silence stretched between them like a living thing, breathing with possibility and danger. Jin-Woo stood there, the Ferrari keys dangling from his fingers, catching the light with each small movement of his hand. His bodyguards watched with the alertness of men who had learned to read their boss's moods and Right now, his mood was unreadable, volatile, unpredictable. Marcus remained perfectly still, his hands hanging loose at his sides, grease under his fingernails, dirt on his knees from kneeling on the ground. He had won the challenge, completed the impossible task, but he showed no triumph, no satisfaction. Just that same quiet presence that had unnerved Jin-Woo from the beginning. "I listen," Jin-Woo repeated slowly, tasting the words. "You listen." A bitter laugh escaped his throat, sharp and painful. "Do you know what my father used to say to me? When I was your age, maybe younger? He used to say I was deaf. Deaf to business, deaf to honor, deaf to the family name. He said I would never hear what mattered." Marcus said nothing, but his eyes didn't leave Jin-Woo's face. "I spent 30 years proving him wrong," Jin-Woo continued, his voice taking on a raw quality that made his bodyguards shift uncomfortably. Their boss never spoke like this, never revealed himself, never showed the cracks beneath the armor. "I built an empire on making people hear me, making them fear me, making them respect me, and now here you are, a child with nothing, no one, and you can hear things I never could. Things my expensive mechanics with their expensive equipment cannot hear." He looked down at the keys in his hand, then up at the Ferrari, then back at Marcus. "You should have had a better life, boy. You should have had someone to see what you are, what you can do. Instead, the world made you invisible." "I'm used to invisible," Marcus said softly. "Invisible is safe, safe." Jin-Woo's laugh was harsh. "There's no such thing as safe. Not for people like us. Not for people the world has already decided aren't worth seeing." He paused, and something shifted in his expression, a decision being made in real time, a calculation of risk and reward that had nothing to do with money or power, but being seen by the right person that changes everything. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and extended his hand with the keys. Marcus looked at them, but didn't take them immediately. "This isn't charity," Jin-Woo said, his voice firm now, businesslike, back in control. "I don't do charity. Charity is for the weak, for people who need to feel good about themselves. This is something else." "What is it?" Marcus asked. Jin-Woo studied him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every failure he had ever experienced. Every moment his father had called him worthless, every time he had transformed pain into cruelty to survive. "This is recognition. This is me seeing you the way no one ever saw me. And this is me giving you what I never got a chance." He pressed the keys into Marcus's palm, folding the boy's fingers around them. "Monday morning, 7 o'clock. You come to my main shop in Koreatown. The address is on the key fob. You show up, and you work. Not as my slave, as my junior chief mechanic. You get salary, housing, private school. I take care of everything, but you work, you understand. You earn this. Every single day, you earn it." Marcus stared at the keys in his hand, feeling their weight, their reality. "Why would you do this?" Jin-Woo turned away, suddenly unable to look at the boy directly, unable to face the vulnerability that this moment demanded. "Because talent like yours doesn't come along every day, because wasting it would be a crime, and because," he stopped, his jaw working, the words fighting to stay buried where they belonged. But they came anyway, rising up from some deep place he had sealed off decades ago. "Because when I was 15 years old, I stood in front of my father and showed him a business plan. A real plan. Detailed, smart, innovative. And you know what he did?" Marcus waited. He laughed. "Just like I laughed at you. He called me worthless. He said I was too stupid to understand real business, that I would never amount to anything, that I was an embarrassment to the family name. And then he threw my plan in the garbage." Jin-Woo's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. "Every cruel thing I've done since then, every person I've hurt, every time I've mocked someone weaker, all goes back to that moment. To not being seen, to not being valued, to being invisible in the eyes of the one person whose opinion mattered." He turned back to Marcus, and his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been rage, or might have been both. I became powerful, so no one could ever make me invisible again. But power didn't fill the hole. It just made it bigger, darker, hungrier. And today, when I saw you standing there, when I laughed at you, I saw my father. I became my father. And I hated myself for it. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and bleeding. Jin-Woo's bodyguards pretended they hadn't heard, their eyes carefully averted, giving their boss this moment of naked humanity. So no, Jin-Woo continued, his voice stronger now, rebuilding itself. This isn't charity. This is me breaking a cycle. This is me refusing to be the man who destroys talent because I'm too bitter to recognize it. This is me giving you the chance I never got, so that maybe I can live with the man I see in the mirror. Marcus looked down at the keys again, then up at the Ferrari, gleaming red in the afternoon sun. What if I fail? What if I'm not as good as you think? Then you fail, Jin-Woo said simply. And you learn, and you get better. That's how it works. That's how anything worth doing works. He gestured to the car. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to be extraordinary. I think you already are. Marcus took a slow breath, feeling the weight of this moment. Understanding that his entire life was pivoting on this single point in time. Monday morning, 7 o'clock, Jin-Woo confirmed. He started walking toward the waiting SUV, then paused and looked back. One more thing, Marcus. It was the first time he had used the boy's name. Don't thank me. Don't ever thank me for this. You earned this in 60 seconds. You proved yourself. All I'm doing is acknowledging what's already true. Understand? Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. Jin-Woo climbed into the SUV, the convoy prepared to leave, engines starting, doors closing. But before they pulled away, Jin-Woo rolled down his window one last time. Fix the valve before you drive it, and get that weld reinforced. I meant what I said about the fracture. And then they were gone, disappearing around the corner, leaving Marcus alone in the junkyard with a Ferrari, worth more than most houses in this neighborhood. Marcus stood alone in the gathering dusk, the Ferrari keys warm in his palm from Jin-Woo's touch, the weight of them somehow heavier than they should be. Around him, the junkyard settled into its evening silence, the distant hum of traffic on the freeway, the occasional bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through rusted metal skeletons. The world had shifted on its axis in the span of 60 seconds, and now Marcus had to figure out what that meant. He looked at the Ferrari, really looked at it, not as a machine to be diagnosed, but as an object that now belonged to him. The absurdity of it hit him all at once. A 14-year-old boy who slept in a shelter, who owned exactly 3 shirts and 2 pairs of pants, who sometimes went to bed hungry, now possessed a vehicle worth $250,000. The math didn't work. The universe had broken its own rules. But Marcus had learned long ago that the universe didn't follow the rules people expected. His mother had been a good woman, a loving woman, and she still ended up in prison for a crime of desperation. His father had been a brilliant mechanic, could make any engine sing, and he still died of a heart attack at 32 with no insurance and no savings. Goodness didn't guarantee safety. Talent didn't guarantee success. The world was chaos, dressed up in the illusion of fairness. And yet here was this moment, this rupture in the expected narrative, this gift wrapped in cruelty and transformation. Jin-Woo had been terrible to him, had mocked him, had seen him as less than human, and then something had shifted. Recognition, that's what Jin-Woo had called it. The act of truly seeing another person, of acknowledging their worth when the world insists they have none. Marcus walked slowly toward the Ferrari, his reflection appearing in its polished surface, a distorted version of himself, stretched and compressed by the curve of the metal. He looked small in that reflection, almost invisible. But he didn't feel small. Not anymore. He popped the hood release and lifted it carefully, reverently. The engine gleamed beneath, a masterpiece of engineering, every component precisely placed, every connection purposeful. Marcus grabbed his toolbox from where it sat against the junkyard fence. Battered red metal box he'd found in a dumpster 3 years ago, filled with tools he'd collected piece by piece, some traded, some gifted, some rescued from trash heaps. The tools looked ridiculous next to this machine, cheap and worn and inadequate. But tools were tools. Metal was metal. And Marcus knew that the value wasn't in the equipment, it was in the hands that wielded it, the mind that understood what needed to be done. He found the secondary air control valve exactly where he knew it would be. Stuck at that 40% open position, its electronic actuator frozen by a combination of carbon buildup and a failed solenoid. 7 minutes, that's all it took him to clean the carbon deposits with a wire brush and a prayer. To bypass the failed solenoid with a jumper wire he fashioned from an old coat hanger to restore the valve to proper function. 7 minutes to fix what 3 Beverly Hills mechanics had missed entirely. As he worked, his mind drifted to Monday morning. 7 o'clock, Koreatown, a new life waiting like an unopened door. Part of him, the part that had learned to survive by trusting nothing and no one whispered warnings. This was too good to be true. Jin-Woo would change his mind. The address would be fake. This was all some elaborate cruel joke. And Monday morning, Marcus would show up to an empty building, or, worse, 2 men with weapons who would teach him the price of dreaming above his station. But another part of him, the part that could hear engines speak and feel fractures in metal through vibrations in the earth, that part knew truth when it encountered it. Jin-Woo's confession had been real. The pain in his voice, the recognition in his eyes, those couldn't be faked. The man had seen himself in Marcus, had seen the ghost of who he used to be before cruelty hardened him, and in that moment of recognition, something human had broken through. Marcus closed the hood gently and stepped back. The Ferrari purred now, its engine note clean and true. No more corrupted song, no more discord. Fixed, made whole, given back its voice. He walked around to the driver's side and opened the door. The interior smelled of leather and money, of a world Marcus had only ever observed from the outside. He slid into the driver's seat, and it adjusted automatically to his smaller frame. Motors whirring, cushions conforming, his hands found the steering wheel, and even though he was too young to have a license, even though driving this car anywhere would be illegal and dangerous, he started the engine. The V8 roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder, power barely restrained, hundreds of horses waiting for his command. Marcus sat there, feeling the vibration through the seat, through the steering wheel, through his entire body. This was real. This was happening. His life had changed, but he didn't drive away. Not yet. Instead, he turned off the engine, removed the keys, and got out. He closed the door carefully and stood looking at the Ferrari in the fading light. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to get it to a safe place. Tomorrow, he would start planning for Monday morning. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of becoming whatever it was Jin-Woo saw in him. But tonight, right now, he just needed to stand here and understand what had happened. A man had looked at him, really looked at him, man, decided he was worth saving. Not because of charity or pity, but because of recognition, because talent deserved to be acknowledged, because cruelty didn't have to be passed on like a genetic disease, because cycles could be broken if someone was brave enough to break them. Marcus thought about Jin-Woo's father, about the business plan thrown in the garbage, about the wounds that never healed, but only transformed into different kinds of wounds. He thought about his own mother, sitting in a prison cell, and wondered if she would be proud of this moment or terrified by it. He thought about all the boys like him, invisible boys with extraordinary gifts, whose talents would die in shelters and streets and junkyards because no one ever looked close enough to see them. And he made himself a promise, standing there in the twilight with a Ferrari at his back and an uncertain future ahead. If he made it, if Monday morning was real, if Jin-Woo kept his word, if this chance became a life, then he would remember this moment. He would remember what it felt like to be invisible. And someday, when he had the power to see others, he would look. He would really look. He would recognize the invisible ones, the forgotten ones, the ones the world had decided weren't worth seeing, because that's what Jin-Woo had given him, more valuable than any car, more lasting than any job. He had given Marcus the understanding that being seen was the first step toward being saved. And being saved carried with it the responsibility to eventually save others. The stars began appearing overhead, tiny points of light pushing back against the darkness. Marcus locked the Ferrari carefully, pocketed the keys, and started the long walk back to the shelter. He would return tomorrow with help, with a plan, with whatever it took to protect this gift until Monday morning arrived. And on Monday, at 7 o'clock exactly, Marcus Johnson would walk into that shop in Koreatown and begin the work of earning everything he had been given. Not because he owed Jin-Woo anything, but because respect was something you built with your hands, one repair at a time, one honest moment at a time, one recognition of another person's humanity at a time. The junkyard disappeared behind him as he walked, but he would carry it with him, always the memory of the place where he had been invisible. And the moment when someone finally saw him, that was worth more than any Ferrari. That was worth everything. If this story moved you, pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been judged by how you look rather than what you're capable of? Have you ever dismissed someone's worth because of where they came from, only to realize later you were completely wrong? Or maybe you've been the invisible one, the person with extraordinary gifts that nobody took the time to see. Tell us about your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about recognition, redemption, and breaking cycles of cruelty, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.